Looking at the Arsenal squad on tour in itself, so I think about 30 players have been called up. A few players caught my eye. They're ones that have been their futures are a bit uncertain. So you mentioned Zinchenko there. Firstly, Reiss Nelson is on the tour after his hamstring injury. Lokonga as well. He's been included, and these are three players who you'd expect if the right offer came in, Arsenal would be open to letting them leave. The fact that they have been included in the tour party. Does that suggest to you that maybe they could still have a part to play? They might be fighting for their futures, or is it just about, keeping their fitness in check, trying to get them some minutes ahead of potential exits this summer?
I think it's the latter. I do. Some of these players they need to play. They're still part of the squad. So Mikel will use them, and I think we've seen in previous tours, summer tours, he's done that even with players who it's been pretty obvious they're going to be on their way out. And so I would still think some of these players, your Nelsons, your Zinchenko's, if a buyer can be found for these players, he'll use them. They'll get some minutes, I think, but that's not. It's not going to be. That's not going to stop them from moving on later on in the summer. I think he'll just utilise the squad. He'll give everyone some minutes while they're Arsenal players. It's important to do that because not just for giving those players minutes, but it also allows the other players to come off because no one can do 90 minutes at this stage of the season, or no one should be doing 90 minutes at this stage of the season. So it's very useful to have them there, but no, sort of long-term futures is very much away from the club. I would say anyway, if a buyer can be found, and I don't think that's going to be that easy, especially when it comes to Zinchenko.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of also Reiss Nelson specifically, there's not a buyer for him, it seems, but there are reports from Sammy Mockbell that Fulham are discussing another loan deal for him. Of course, he had a disrupted loan spell there last season. Got a really his serious hamstring injury came at a really frustrating time because he was just starting to build up a run of starts for Fulham. I think he started 5 games in a row, then suffered that season-ending injury. But there is apparently interest in a second loan deal for him at Fulham. Is that one that is feasible for you? Could you see that happening or going through, quite smoothly?
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably would have bought him on a permanent basis had he not got the injury last season. Now he was doing well there; he was making his mark. I know, Fulham fans who are friends of mine who are watching him a lot of the time, thought he was doing very, very well, and he was dangerous whenever he was on the pitch. So it was going well that loan spell. So it doesn't surprise me that Fulham are quite keen to have another look at him, and hopefully, fingers crossed this time for them, for Arsenal, and for Reiss most of all, that he can stay fit because he showed last season what he can do when he's getting regular game time because he's a very good player. There's no doubt about that. So it doesn't surprise me at all, that one. I think it's a move that he would be very happy for. He's a London boy, I always think of Reiss, if he is ever to leave Arsenal, and I'm sure it will happen at some stage. It will be to sort of stay in London. He likes he likes his home comforts. He likes London. So yeah, I think it would be a very good move for all parties. That I hope that one happens as well.
Yeah, especially because, he's already got Smith Rowe there, Iwobi,
Yeah.
Lennon. Like you say, these players, they leave Arsenal, stay in London. Fulham have offered lots of them a new permanent home. And in terms of just like Nelson's quality, I think it was the pre-season of 2017-18. He really sort of burst onto the scene, and we thought, wow, this kid is something special. But then, I think Bukayo Saka maybe became the player that we thought Reiss Nelson was going to become. Of course, he's not had a great time with injuries. This latest hamstring one, it's the latest in a sort of long line of fitness issues for him. He's only got 2 years left on his contract now. I think a lot of Arsenal fans would have seen that Fulham report and thought, why is this a loan deal? Why can we not sell him permanently? But like I say, he's had these injuries. He's not had a consistent run of starts for pretty much in his entire Premier League career. So does that go a long way to explaining why there's not a lot of permanent interest, or would you have thought that there might be some interest still in a permanent deal for him this summer?
I No, I think he's literally missed half of the season. If he hadn't have got injured last season, I think he would have left on a permanent deal this summer. But it's quite hard, I think, for clubs who are considering spending quite a bit of money on him to sort of look at it and think, well, he didn't play for the last 6 months. How is this hamstring injury? Is it worth a risk? So if he was only had 1 year left, then I think it would be much more of an issue for Arsenal. But he has still got 2 years left with an option as well to extend by another year. So Arsenal are not in a rush. They don't have to be in a rush to sell. And, his value at the moment, because he's missed 6 months, is not going to be that great. If he goes to Fulham, has a full season there next season, stays injury free, plays well, comes back, and still has potentially another 2 years left on his deal with that option, then his value is going to be far higher. So I think this one makes sense, to be honest. I know everyone kind of wants permanent deals and money in the bank and all that sort of stuff, but I do think this one makes more sense for it to be another loan. And then, fingers crossed he can stay fit. And then, as I said, I think his value will be much higher in 12 months' time.
Yes, as Arsenal fans, let's certainly hope so. And of course, Reiss Nelson, he's not yeah, I think it was that 22-23 season. Of course, there was that spectacular Bournemouth goal, which whatever happens with Reiss Nelson, we will always have that in our memory banks and in our hearts. And just thinking about the most special goals that the Emirates has seen, maybe you think of the Nelson goal. Henry against Leeds, Arshavin against Barcelona, maybe even Rice against Real Madrid last year. But I think, as the kids say, the limbs for that Bournemouth goal was something else on that day. Just wanted to ask you, does that Reiss Nelson goal against Bournemouth rank as your favourite Emirates goal of all time, or is it somewhere at the top of the list? Is another goal at the top of the list for you, maybe?
No, it's Nelson. I've never heard the Emirates like it. It was unbelievable. I was right behind him as well. I had the best view in the whole stadium pretty much of that goal. And unfortunately, I was in the press box that day. I wasn't in the stand, so I couldn't celebrate it the way I wanted to celebrate it. But I've never heard the Emirates like it. And for the drama of it all as well, you talk about Arshavin, which was again, that's up there. Arshavin was my favourite Emirates moment before Nelson's goal. But this one, the context of it coming from 2-0 down to win 3-2 with the last kick of the game to move 5 points clear, I think it was at the top of the table. It really felt like at that moment. I know this didn't pan out, but it felt like at that moment the title. This is written in the stars. These sort of things just don't happen unless you go on and win a title, and you could just sense that in the stadium, the explosion and noise and emotion, and it was just unbelievable that moment. I know everyone talks about football's about winning trophies, and it is, of course, it is. But football's about moments. It's about enjoying moments, and it's moments that will stay with you forever. And that moment will stay with me forever, no matter the fact that Arsenal didn't go on to win the title that year. It really was. It was very special.